safely from the Earth.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Feet, down at 2, feels good, 20 feet, going down at 2, 10 feet, 10 feet, contact, push, Houston, you can tell America that Challenger is at...
Commander Gene Cernan and Lunar Module pilot Jack Schmidt guided Challenger to a pinpoint landing on a retrograde orbit. Now less than 2 hours, Johnson Space Center in Houston, and mission control for Orion is growing larger in the field of view. Orion conducted the final major maneuver of its mission, a return trajectory correction burn of its thrust circuitous orbit past the moon and back. Over the next couple of hours. Next up for Orion will be the crew module's separation from the European service module. That pilot a maneuver called the raise maneuver, a dynamics folks here in Mission Control indicates such a precise trajectory for the spacecraft, it was determined that the raise maneuver was not required. That could still change following crew module, service module separation. Round Orion, half as hot as the outer surface. Orion will perform what is called a skip entry, dipping into the atmosphere, then lifting out of the atmosphere and dipping back in like a flat rock skimming across a pond. This will prove during entry when the buildup of heat-generated plasma Central Time for just under 5 minutes, right around the time of peak heating on Orion, as a programmed command stored on board will trigger the deployment of 3 parachutes at the top of Orion. Deployment of 2 drogue chutes and 3 pilot parachutes, followed by the 3 large main chutes to slow down Orion, enabling it to gently splash down in the Pacific. The current splashdown time, 11:39 and 42 seconds. Meteorology group here at the Johnson Space Center has just issued. Should be a splendid day for Orion's homecoming. Daryl, good morning to you, and as they say in the
SS Portland with a fantastic view of the area of splashdown. I just spoke with the recovery team. They say we are currently 5 miles away from the splashdown currently positioned. This is looking forward for the parachutes. The forward bay cover, when it separates, will be all downwind of us. Now, Hawk helicopters that will be used for the operation. Helicopter. Now, one of the helicopters will use the Navy's infrared targeting system, which will start looking for jettison to allow them to come out. Now, NASA's plan going helicopters, if you can see just to the left of that, SS cameras mounted to them. These are ultra-purpose capability of this vessel, the U.S. to launch the small boats. You see them at the water and underneath water photography of the heat shield. Orion stabilized with tow ropes. You see that bright yellow structure right dead in the middle of your screen? That is the cradle that the boats and the winch lines will pull into position and put it right down on top of that cradle. They will flood that deck with water, roughly about 6 feet, and then they'll put it in position for its ride back to you in Houston.
Coverage. Orion is wrapping any human-rated spacecraft designed to return humans to Earth. And of course, the big test that's coming up, the ultimate test of its heat shield, that a variety of people about all that. Philip Hargrove, who will use the moon board to explain it all.
Yes, welcome to the moon board here at the Apollo Saturn V Center. It's been a super exciting month since the Artemis I here at Kennedy Space Center, and it put on an that core stage. Those solid rocket boosters provide over 8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Now, those boosters and the core stage got us going maneuvered, and this means that we're getting into a low Earth and we stayed in that orbit for was on its way out to the moon. So it spent about 4 days of the surface of the moon and did an outbound powered flyby. Now that powered flyby means that we're taking advantage of orbit that we were targeting is called a DRO, or a distant retrograde orbit. And what that means, it provides a safe, efficient path back home when we're ready. So this allowed us to learn how to operate in deep space, one of the core tenets of this mission. And then once we were ready, we started our trip. Flyby, this time targeting our return of the moon. And then we began our return transit. Return looks like and what our entry is at.
11,000 miles away from Earth as it continues a very, very precise trajectory for a splashdown that is scheduled. Space launch system. The first outbound powered flyby of the moon was performed 5 days later on Orion on a very precise trajectory for its ultimate distant retrograde orbit that would allow Orion next day. Orion surpassed the record set during Apollo 13 52 years ago for the greatest distance ever traveled by a human-rated spacecraft designed to return humans to the Earth. On November 28th, Orion reached its farthest distance from the Earth, some 268,000 second engine firing behind the moon to whip 44 seconds from now. The initial for more than 25 days it did just that. So with that, how with one of the first persons that will actually be in.
That's right, Rob. called cricks, which are essentially small inflatable Navy boats. He's just about 20 or so minutes away from getting into that boat. Thank you, Wayne, for coming up here and making some time for us to tell us about the operation today.
Of course, sir.
So tell me exactly how your team goes about securing this spacecraft after it comes back from space, splashes down the water just a few miles from us.
Well, sequence of events are going to go splash down. You said earlier, for those engineering purposes. Once that's done, then we put the what's called a pony collar on it, and then basically it's a sequence of events of
4 to 5 foot currently, which is within your limit. Let's take a look now underneath the well deck. Really, literally going to be going down here and right to that bobbing spacecraft and bobbing inflatable boat with your team.
well, this is just another day in the park. Something from under the water. We're going to recover something that fell from the sky.
You can see on our screen, those are the tip edges of just the importance of it. One of the first people to put your hands on a spacecraft that
Ventus and just ready and excited.
become a Navy diver, and then ultimately, now that you're on this operation, looking back at that choice.
Well, February 2003 from Leeds. A few hours later, we're watching the news, and unfortunately, what we heard was, you know, it was not a. And, you know, 20 years later, to be able to be part of history of the first.
Many lessons learned for our agency, but interesting that it
They have around the world.
and briefly, Wayne. Your team.
Good luck, be safe, and let's be part of history.
All right, we wish you the best. Wayne, thank you.
Beat this view, though, a view of the Earth where Orion enters the Earth's atmosphere at the conclusion of this 25.5-day mission. The spacecraft is going to rely.
The difference is we are bigger. Apollo weighed roughly 13,500 pounds. At a fundamental level, all round parachutes are alike. Being associated with high velocity deployments much better than a solid canopy can. And once the system slows down, it deploys the mains. The mains are how we take the drag on that nylon surface and material than the drag surfaces are. So to see, you have to negotiate the chute that's already out there. So was to deploy the backup chute with the main system itself. With just 2 main parachutes functioning. When we did the pad abort test at White Sands, I was quite scared. But I wasn't scared for our system. I was scared for the repositioning after the rockets took off the capsule and repositioned it. It was perfect. That thing. Cover came off because I thought, wow, we're not done, but we're
milestone that will be the separation of the crew. The beginning of Orion's entrance for Exploration Systems, Kathy Kerner. Kathy, thanks for joining us this morning. It's great to see you.
Today, and really excited. There's a lot of energy in the room. In human exploration.
You know, the mission had its trials and tribulations gauged for a crewed mission 2 years from now.
By the Exploration Ground Systems team, the SLS team, and the Orion team has been fantastic. We've been learning how the spacecraft operates. We've been learning how to fly this amazing machine, and it's gone so well that we've actually been able to add tests during the mission that help accelerate the spacecraft once we have crew on board.
Building up around the spacecraft twice as much as
of many tests that we have going forward, and one of many.
And as the Earth grows larger and larger in the field of view, Orion continues its that. In the meantime, let's go back out to the Pacific, the destination for Orion today, where
to recover the Orion crew module.
Absolutely, I am happy to be here.
So tell me a little bit about the reason you're here and what you're doing as you observe the operations.
The process of getting ready for the next Artemis mission.
Particular capsule has sensors all over it, more than any future capsule will have.
Yeah.
I should mention that we just had helicopters. Shannon, continuing now with our interview back of the ship, what are your thoughts on both of those?
Crew is not staying in the capsule for an extended period of time. On a ship, and we will be looking at all the different methodologies for while on the space station, for example, we have lots of, when I am back on Earth, it's just a huge sigh of relief. All the details, and I can just sit and relax a little bit.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for all the insight. In Houston.
Thanks, Daryl. Thank you, Shannon, and happy sailing out there as we continue to watch the scintillating divs and test objectives are being conducted and will be recovered.
Martha, and behind me is a mock-up. Recovery director is to lead the interagency team that will recover the capsule. Ever since the Apollo program, NASA and the Navy have worked together to recover NASA's capsules in the water. So one of the huge benefits of working with the Navy is the fact that they're operational and we leverage their core competence crew back safely from the moon. On the Artemis I recovery day, my job will be to direct the circles in the air, and they are waiting for the capsule to re-capsule and recover it into the well deck of the ship. Perform all of the work we need to do because we are gathering data, 3 good main parachutes, and when we hear
And again, that whole recovery operation will take several hours. We are going to remain on the air for at least 2 hours or so after splashdown so that we can bring you all the information regarding the initial safing of the vehicle. All of that data, mostly about the Moment is the man who is going to be watching all of that very, very carefully, John Kowal, who's the Orion Thermal Protection System Manager. John, your big moment is lying ahead here, the plunge back into the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah, so, as you mentioned, 5,000 during that first beautiful launch, right? So that gets converted into velocity. So we're going at 25,000 miles per hour, which is, how do you even fathom what that means? It's 7 miles per second. Wow. So all that energy, enough to power, we have to get rid of it. And how do we do? Go up, the temperatures go up, we're talking upwards of around 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the flow field. So that energy goes into the flow field, and then the flow field wants to...
And to prepare the vehicle for launch.
Since developing that type of system, as well as getting the materials back. So there was a lot of it's like a wind tunnel with used in Apollo. It's in a different form. Is because that's where the problems happen, and so we've done a lot of testing there in the thermal
until we come out of that second blackout period. So that's and is back at the Kennedy Space Center in a few weeks for post-flight analysis. What are the sorts of things that you and your engineering team will be looking for to give it a passing grade in preparation for putting a crew on board a couple of years?
Into two different categories. The first is we measure temperatures, we measure heat rates, we measure to inform our computer modeling methods, and that's another thing that we need to make sure that it's performing how we thought it was going to perform, of course, right? But looking at the heat shield, just boundary layer transition may have occurred. So there's so much to just visually see, and then we'll be taking samples.
Very good. It's going to be a very important time. System Manager, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Sure. Thank you.
That will begin a trip hammer series of events as Orion begins the process of entering the Earth's atmosphere. Entry interface just 36 minutes away. So let's go back out to the Pacific Ocean west of Baja, where Daryl.
That's right, Rob. A quick update for you on the out here in the Pacific Ocean, just the back of the ship and into the well deck. Initially, this was supposed to happen. Management team made the decision to, as you look off into the sky, we're awaiting the second to last weather balloon release that we will have for the day. Of course, the parachutes and their hardware themselves. All of it together, they take in the winds, and you can feel the winds are picking up a little bit. That wind data will give us refined information and data. And now, we're not alone out here in the Pacific Ocean. We do have friends helping us today, and I want to take a shot now of a ship off in the distance that has joined us for today's today. It is what the Navy calls a littoral ship. and that is to provide security to this location during splashdown. So for the public safety, to prevent boats from coming in, which are in the range of 4 to 5 feet, Orion capsule into the well deck. That is a highly choreographed and very dynamic operation. Very dynamic environment with waves splashing. Teams on ropes trying to stabilize Orion here on the USS Portland out in the Pacific Ocean. Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Daryl. Telemetry is now being processed through the TDRS network throughout the course of the mission. And now that we're on TDRS the rest of the way, we'll be able to have real-time data through our Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System constellation. Milestone on the road home in this final phase of Orion's 25.5-day mission. So let's take a visual and interactive look
at the European Service Module and the Orion Crew Module. So as we know, these two systems have been working in touch abort system and made it on top of SL. Just 26 days ago. So we know that one of the primary test objectives of this mission is to make sure that this heat shield at the bottom of the mission, they're coming in at about 17,000 miles per 5,000 miles per hour. So we're coming in way hotter. Happen. So let's talk about what that looks like. So this forward segment of the Orion Crew Module, and then the stars of the show are three main So now that we know a little bit about what that hardware looks like, we can take a look at what that journey actually looked like. So as we know, we had a 7-day return transit. And as we approached the Earth, the service module and the crew module separated from one another, and the crew module is going to use its reaction control thrust interface. This is at an altitude of about 400,000 feet, and this is where we define a lot of our entry conditions, such as the flight path angle and the velocity. Now, this is really important because if you come in at too shallow of an angle, you may bounce right off the atmosphere. Is actually toe the line and also be minimizing the G loading. Down west of California, we will have these red is going to recover the capsule and bring it back.
Orion's return to Earth and its splashdown in the Pacific, just 7 minutes away now from crew module, service module separation. Rays and all of the other propulsive has been monitored in the pyrotechnically separate from the crew module, leaving the crew module on its own. Entry interface is shoot deployment sequence events leading up to pointed up, which is called stable 1, or point uprighting system known as the CMUS deploys a series Orion right side up or keep it right side up in its stable 1 position. Those 5 bags are packed in hard containers and installed at top landing and opens up a valve for helium to flow into those uprighting bags. It is for Orion to enable Navy divers to approach the vehicle. One of the first things that they'll be looking for is any leakage of toxic gas or toxic fuel from the vehicle, assuming there is no such leak and that Navy assets in order to begin the just under 4,000 miles away from Earth. Flying around the moon for its outbound return to Earth had ever been passing the distance record established 52 years. The flight dynamics folks have put up a graphic northwest coast of Australia en route to its ultimate trajectory that will carry it across the Pacific. It will be moving from south to north across the Pacific Ocean to the splashdown zone, almost a direct straight line towards the point of splashdown, which will be west of Baja California. Now just under 2 minutes until crew module, service module separation. "30 seconds until separation. This will come at an altitude of 3,200 statute miles. "10 seconds until set. So with Orion flying on its own, we're about pre-interface where Orion peak heating of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Basically a fine-tuning of the orientation and the angle. So the raise burn was executed heat that will build up around the heat shield at the 41 seconds Central Time. Again, entry interface is scheduled at 11:20. Tracking and data relay satellite system, receiving data that's being processed through the TDRS network. Just a reminder, and with the temperatures expected to build up very quickly, we will begin the first of two blackout periods, which has been stored on board. Around 11:25 and 4 seconds, flat rock on a pond. That is a maneuver that data will be gathered for to try to bring in multiple splashdown sites for crewed missions in the future. The second will last for about 2 minutes and 55 zeros. This is mission on the loops. Entry Flight Director Judd Freeling and his team of flight controllers watching carefully over their data as they oversee the arrival of Orion for its have emerged from the second of the two blackouts. Orion, through a series of pre-programmed commands stored on board, will conduct a series of role reversals. This is very much like space shuttles conducted during their entries back to the left and then back to the right, banking role reversal. Energy, excess inertia, and speed, and it will go subsonic at about 11:34 and 55 seconds a.m. Central Time, some 5 minutes before splash. 3 that will pull the forward bay cover off chutes, and then the 3 large main parachutes, 3 orange and white parachutes. That'll be the moment we'll be waiting for. Orion is approaching the northwest coast of to about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Moving from south to north. 1.5 minutes until entry interface. Inside the cabin of Orion, this listening and the initiation of the parachute deployment system. Just to recap, the 16-second firing of Orion's thrusters oriented the vehicle, raising it just a tad so that its heat shield was at the proper orientation in the direction of travel to begin entry interface in about 5 minutes. North across the Pacific Ocean. A journey that began with the power of the launch, where temperatures around Orion will build up. Once again, at entry, seconds after reaching entry interface, we'll begin the first of and here's the ground. We're just 1 minute 44 seconds away from entry interface, moving from south to north to its splashdown target west of Baja California. Just 1 minute away from entry interface. Of the data here shortly, once we standing by for entry interface and the we are now in the entry phase. Be happening at the moment where the temperatures around the heat shield are reaching about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the moment of truth for Orion. We should be coming out of this first blackout period Again, this is a visualization of what should be happening with Orion at the moment, although we are in a blackout period. Conduct the skip entry maneuver that will splashdown site. Clocks here in mission control showing the sequence of events yet to come. The first blackout about 6 minutes from now. Of the parachutes. First, a pair of drogue chutes, 3 pilot parachutes that will when we emerge from altitude miles. Flight Dynamics reports that Orion is right on the money, coming right down the pike. A good view out of the cabin camera looking out of the upper hatch of Orion. We should be performing the skip entry maneuver momentarily. Good communications established with Orion. Orion is again banking maneuvers to bleed off excess inertia and to dissipate heat around the spacecraft. (70,000 feet), with Orion traveling about 16,400 miles an hour, range on the start of the second blackout period. We should be a velocity of 20 times the speed of sound. If all goes as planned, we should be out of the blackout period with a solid lockup on the vehicle at 11:31 and 46. This is Mission Control Houston. The airborne WB-57, one of the airborne assets to track position of the vehicle. We should be coming out of this and helos flying off 12,600 miles an hour, range to splashdown 288 statute miles. This view on the deck of the USS Portland. And there is a view out of the cabin camera of Orion as it continues a series of role reversals. We have data back from the spacecraft. Flight Dynamics reports Orion straight and narrow on a true course toward its splashdown site. Forward bay cover jettisoning less than 3.5 minutes from now. (150,000 feet off the ocean). Orion now traveling at Mach 10. Two minutes until forward bay cover jettisoning. Orion 100,000 feet. The spacecraft about to go subsonic. 45 seconds until forward bay cover jettisoning. Orion now at 50,000 feet. Forward bay cover jettisoning pyros are armed. $25,000 feet. Drogues have been deployed. Two good drogue shoots reported by the recovery team out in the Pacific. And we're on mains. 5,000 feet. And there it is, high over the Pacific. Orion now in view. Orion in the perfect orientation, 1,000 feet. From Tranquility Base to Taurus Littrow to the tranquil waters of the Pacific, the latest chapter of NASA's journey to the moon comes to a close. Orion, back on Earth. Coast of Baja California. The crew module uprighting system now once again splashdown occurring at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific. Spacecraft bringing its 25-and-a-half-day mission to an end. Orion's recovery beacon is in great shape. Stable 1, just in the orientation that had been expected. Five crew module uprighting system bags have been deployed, and we are now receiving word that all 5 of the crew module uprighting system bags are fully inflated. So that's exactly what we had hoped for. Orion safely bobbing up and down in the Pacific Ocean. That it splashed down around 5 nautical miles away from the USS Portland. The recovery ship and Navy boats and divers will be approaching the vehicle before long. The spacecraft is in what is called a stable 1 configuration, upright, just the way we had expected it to be. 5 perfectly inflated crew module uprighting system bags for Orion, first of the Navy helicopter. For the next 2 hours while we conduct a series of test objectives to tests of the for recovery forces that will be approaching the spacecraft in the future. Orion, which is about 5 nautical miles away from the ship, indicate no damage to the spacecraft and no hazardous fuel leaking. 40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. having splashed down at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, around 5 nautical miles or so from the USS Portland. A textbook entry for the vehicle. On the USS Portland, Daryl, how did it look?
Around 3,000 feet, but we saw those. It was a beautiful sight, probably just about to the Pacific Ocean. Saw the splash, and then of course the assets aboard 60s. We have 2 of them in the air, and they high quality, high definition imagery of the capsule in the water. There's a spotter aboard. We have photography track around the splashdown location. They have marked, if you can see it, the marked location where some of the debris has come down, the debris that was part of the tracked by the Sasquatch team, and floatable smoke grenades. Helicopters will be out for another 20 minutes. One of them getting very close to go right by the splash. We are going to a point that's going to be 1 mile out. That's our next waypoint. 1 mile out from the splashdown location. Ammonia boil off. And that's why the Navy boats are not yet next to the capsule. We're still going to wait that out. The ammonia on the capsule is used for cooling purposes to keep the cabin. If they do that, it's not quite safe to get close. So of course we'll keep our eyes fixed to the location. Site. And then once the completion of the ammonia boil-off, the Navy boats will be going.
Flight Director Judd Freeling on the left to his. More important than the NASA Administrator, Bill Nelson. Senator, thank you for joining us today.
Rob, I'm overwhelmed. You know, I'd say it's every day.
I remember years ago celebrate and throw confetti a little bit too early.
Into space, into deep space. And said that we were going to achieve what we thought was impossible. And so that's why this is a whole new breed of astronaut, a vision for the future that can do this as an international venture. And that DNA is, we are adventurers, we are explorers. To continue exploring the heavens.
We had to wait a while for Artemis to finally get to the point where the space launch
participation in the support module, Orion, performing so well that they added a lot of tests. Things that had to happen was that that heat shield had to work, and it did beautifully, where they can skip off the atmosphere. And then
what does this say about NASA and the international partner cooperation
with our friends? And we invite also with commercial partners, and the crew will go down to the surface and to explore beyond.
On Taurus Littrow, the final lunar landing.
50 years, it's a long time. And from regularly the International Space and Scientific Instruments in preparing astronauts. And so it's a new day.
Orion continues to await the arrival of the USS Portland, which shouldn't be very much longer from now, and some flight tests.
Oh, it is my great privilege.
Bullseye splashdown, just about 5 nautical. Arrive near the spacecraft, as you heard from Daryl.
I want to ask you, first of all, operationally, where do we...
Conditioning, and we're doing some signal data.
Because you will be attaching lines and through the use of these out here in the Pacific.
Correct. So it is a delay called capture from the helicopters. It was the most, hear it coming back through the atmosphere, the sonic booms.
So you were working that and then stayed through Thanksgiving.
So we have been waiting for this and preparing for it for a while.
And it looks like you're doing a great job so far. Good luck the rest of the way, Melissa Jones, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right, Rob?
The post-splashdown activities are to the Exploration Ground System Recovery Team that will work over the next several hours to bring the Orion into the well and the road back to putting Americans on the surface.
I was on the roof of the Launch Control Center. I went up there after we came down off the roof. Proud of these guys, amazing. But if you were watching this morning, I loved the video. I don't know if it was on NASA TV or not, but the moon just kept with which they were able to bring it down and seeing the chutes come out. And it's just, I'm of getting us back to the moon. I wish you were alive. We successfully launched this rocket. The splashdown, how can you not? I mean, this at the Johnson Space Center, and just being able to go up.
Artemis II, putting a crew on a vehicle to orbit the moon. It's going to be a complicated mission.
And we see them in training. We get that human face to, the rockets being built during Apollo. We're going in a sustainable way. And improve things here on planet Earth.
Bob Cabana, NASA's Associate Administrator. Thanks so much for being with us, Bob.
Rob, it is always a pleasure to share a mic with the voice of NASA. I think a lot of you, buddy, you know that we've
with us here in Mission Control. This is Mission Control Houston.
Rob, here on the USS Portland. We're just the operation, as you've heard and been commenting. Inside the capsule, it is used for cooling. This is boiling off at this moment into the feet to start detecting has given them the go to close in. The ship, meanwhile, the USS Portland, is on its way to close within 2,000 yards. Bright orange in color at the top. And once the Navy divers have gone in and both on the top side of the water, and then also they have Navy divers prepared to go underneath the capsule. Of this capsule, which is the primary objective in terms of the test. Sure that they have images of it preserved as it is now before the operation begins, where they pull it in. As well as a winch line that then connects to the USS Portland. The well deck of the USS Portland will be into the well deck. The completion of ammonia boil-off from the capsule. They've allowed for up to 2 hours, but it could take a shorter period of time. And once you see those Navy boats closing in, then you'll know that back to you.
Thank you. In control, as the flight controllers watch over the initial phase of the recovery operations. We're joined by the director of the Johnson Space Center, Vanessa Weich. Vanessa, great Sunday to have you here with us on.
Great day. You know, it's amazing that
it's almost like a 2-for-1 here.
It is. I mean, you know, to me this week, and well, for the past 26 days, being able to come into the control center and making sure that the maneuvers, everything that had to happen, done so perfectly and professionally. This team has trained for years. First, you got to plan the mission, as you know. Then you have to execute the mission. And so the years of plan.
Was never a moment to breathe. Artemis II.
One, this test flight, being able to test out the heat shields, those parachutes, as you. Then it's the outfitting of the cabin. All have the food, we have the clothing, all of the things that they're going to. Oh, but I also, Rob, though, I want to say the employees, our entire workforce here. Our European partners. I want to thank our industry partners. It took thousands of the Portland, and then she'll be back going ready to receive her. We're super excited.
Director of the Johnson Space Center, time to celebrate just a little. Flight controllers here in Houston reporting. Janet, good afternoon, and
been a really exciting morning, and can't wait for our teams to get to work out there on the West Coast.
You know, we heard a short time ago from Melissa Jones from the deck of the USS Portland. How complicated?
But you know, our teams make it look easy. And the whole Orion team to deliver on as they went through a great deal of planning. 21st of last year, 2021, come in port in a couple days. So I look forward to seeing that capsule on board the well-deck ship.
Janet, there's a lot of work to be done before Artemis II, but the first milestone here will be getting the vehicle back to your center in Florida for a detailed inspection and detailed analysis. What's the basic?
It will then be loaded onto a truck and transported waste on it, and of course planning the roadways as it gets trucked back to the Kennedy Space Center takes some careful navigation. So by the end of this month, the end of December, facility for its post-flight assessment. After the new year, the inspection and assessment of how that heat and recovery operation. So we're its way up to the Glenn Research Center, where it will be doing some acoustic and further environmental testing up at that center. So journey isn't over. It's just kind of 60th diamond anniversary to have Splash.
Janet Petro, the director of the Kennedy Space Center, joining us today. Orion safely upright and stable one, as the Navy and exploration of a multi-hour choreography USS Portland. On the deck of the USS this time, Daryl, how are things going out there?
Rob, we've got a front row seat to a helicopter encircling it and the Navy boats. Capsule that went around the moon, ammonia boil off. That's the cooling that the Orion crew module uses to keep the astronauts cool. 20 yards from the capsule. They have equipment and a high resolution camera mounted on the side. As we watch this continue to wait and for the Navy divers to get closer, thoughts of Artemis II now come to mind. You've heard folks have been talking about it. Rob has been discussing it with many of the leadership. Well, who are the astronauts going to be for Astronaut 2?
Yeah,
so, any idea?
That is the question. No, to name the crew based on the training flow.
So there's actually a period of training in which you have to do a set amount of time to get ready for that.
Right.
But really predicated.
Going to be a long way out, but I don't think it will be, so I would say.
But they did slip below the surface of the ocean, and so. I'll send it back to you.
With the entry and splashdown went by the book. If you weren't with us, were pulled out in sequential fashion after pilot parachutes and drogue chutes were deployed. The main chutes came out. They reefed in perfect fashion. Pacific time at a point about 5 nautical Orion decelerated to a splashdown velocity of just under 100 miles an hour. It was a very gentle splashdown for Orion. All of its entry in which the spacecraft is a natural function of the heater, although some analysis must, as the Navy boats with the Navy dive. The Orion mission planning lead from the vehicle integration, the way it was designed.
Expected. So this is the furthest. And to see it all come together and have such a successful test mission was amazing.
Michelle, it was a test flight, of course. There was a lot of risk involved, an elevated risk because there was no crew on board, and you could take, shouldn't say liberties, but in order to acquire the data that you were looking for in order to set the stage for the next mission when it with your engineers on a day-to-day basis.
Did a lot of testing and analysis prior to the mission, but and as you mentioned, you know, we pushed the vehicle further than we probably would with the crew on board, but through that we learned a lot. We learned that the vehicle is more robust than we...
Two hats. You have to go back and pour over the data from this.
Still, in the European Service Module for Artemis II is already at Kennedy. After splashdown here, there are some avionics that we're going to and a lot of other crew interfaces like crew displays, and all of that is in the process of being integrated and tested. So we celebrate Artemis I today, but tomorrow we get
control. About an hour and 2 minutes now since the which is approaching the vehicle, as well as Navy recovery teams back on the USS Portland. Daryl?
Right now, we have the orbital is in data for NASA, which will help support the future, and that says a lot. As we look just behind us, it's ammonia using its cooling system. We can see the Navy boats in the water. Visual distance of the orbital and our teams. Let's be honest, a lot of people are out here and they're super excited. You know, a lot of time and effort and training and sailors, as it splashed down, they seem to really bring to this operation. So the USS Portland, some great assets that you bring to the operation, and I also know on the next one, in Artemis II, it'll be a, you know, not work out as designed. To show it off to the public, and that's a matter of pride, I imagine, for the team.
Absolutely. The ship has had about 20 nations participating, so it's an unusual mission in support history.
All of it. I've seen a lot of it. The well deck, certainly
board. So NASA's footprint really isn't too
of the operation.
It's been an honor.
And as we push out our view here, the Baja Peninsula, you can see Orion stable condition. And to the right of that, just to the right of that, you will see the remaining 4 boats. Sailors will put hands on the capsule and secure it. To the rear of the USS Portland. The Portland will then throw out a more than 1,000-foot long rope will then attach to the capsule. It'll connect up. So it's a smooth bottom, 16.5 feet in diameter. So when it is pulled, it doesn't track in the water very well. Around the capsule that helps stabilize it, Navy sailors, a team on each of the 4 ropes, and then on a 5th rope will be the winch standing by awaiting ammonia boil-off. On the Orion capsule, keeps the astronauts, should there the allotted time for that is 2 hours. And so we are just one USS Portland. Of course, we'll have more interviews for you as we go along.
Thank you, Daryl. Looks like a beautiful day out there west of Baja. Of Orion to wrap up its 25.5-day mission, integral into the flight of Orion European Space Agency. Philippe, congratulations.
Good afternoon.
Philippe, that service module went through its paces and was spot on every time it was asked to conduct a burn. Everything that it was planned to do was executed perfectly. Your thoughts? Next flight, in which a crew will be on board, is at the Kennedy. A while for all of that hardware to come together, but you all are off and running on.
And delivered it. Now it's being into
this module. What? Getting to the point where the design will unfold for you and your team.
Well, this is a story that started quite a long time ago, and agreeing on what should be the final integrated and then prepare. That's clear. I mean, going to explore deep space and for sustainable exploration of what is out there, first on the moon, then Mars, and then beyond.
A little moment, perhaps, to sample.
Great. So Valerie has some fresh information. What kind of sea heights are we dealing with?
Where the direction of the waves are coming from, along with the period. So with that information, we're able to provide
the ship deck, leaning back and forth to those forward.
But it's something that we think we can deal with, and it.
and then the ship as it's moving about.
Yeah, everything out there, all the waves, what we're dealing with, and we're constantly monitoring and running the system.
Where are they located, and what frequency are they using?
So they're located on the 05, and it's an X-band radar, and over here on the 04, facing the direction they're coming in.
That's high-tech stuff. I mean, it's, you know, you've got Doppler radar. Many people may be familiar with how that helps with weather, you know, telling our audience and weather people where the weather is, where the dimensions, the waves around the ship.
Yes, yeah, so we're
departed San Diego on Wednesday.
Yeah, probably remember the rest of my life hearing that.
The Pacific, where you have following its splashdown, one-out shaped orbit that enabled Orion to be put through its paces, will set the tone and answer a lot of the questions that will be placed on board the vehicle in a couple of years. The Space Launch System, the next Space Launch System rocket, and the Artemis II Orion vehicle to In the meantime, a number of test objectives are still underway for the vehicle, most notably characterizing the thermal environment of Void in good shape. The meager velocity of just 19 miles an hour. Very gentle splashdown deck. The Spaceflight Meteorology Group had forecast, and there was splashdown. The chutes were cut, autographed. It's going to take several hours for them to hook up the equipment that they need to haul the vehicle into the well deck of the USS Portland and to on the USS Portland, and my colleague Daryl Nail.
We clearly have the visual right now. We can see it in the...
To ensure that our spacecraft are interoperable with the Search Saint application, which is a system that ties into our data from these beacons so that we can see them anywhere in the world nationally. And this is something that we do for all of our human spacing if there was any kind of emergency.
And so let's talk a little bit about that further.
We're able to do this even if we have bad GPS connections that are out there tending the capsule, as well as on the fan tail of the ship. Never had to get out, as well as looking at the performance of the vehicle. Emerging partners, and really the folks that are going to be in harmony.
And you could clearly identify the capsule and
the coders and developers at Goddard Space Flight Center.
of National Affairs, Search and Rescue Office at NASA. Thank you very much for
the astronaut office activities thrilled you, and B was most important.
That is a great question, Rob, and the burns that all went off so well with so small residuals, we hardly had to do any trimming, and half miles from the pinpoint confidence for the next time. You know, all of these things that were individual.
Over the next 2 years, a lot of work to do, but certainly a leg up on what we think will be
Artemis II continuum process, and we got Artemis I mark, and hopefully we will either meet or beat that 2-year mark.
This is not like your father's Apollo 8
around the moon and stunned the world, and proved our inherent Earth, so we can launch out, get into a 24 only Apollo 9, which is the first flight of the LEM, flew down near to the surface, then came back, and Apollo 11 landing.
National Space Station. But if there was a singular image,
and you saw Earth rise over the moon, and thinking that the next time we take those pictures after this mission, but certainly looking forward.
Rob, and we've got a perfect view, a front row by for that moment, which is in just about 18 minutes. Both helicopters, though, are back on the flight deck. Pretty special, but when it comes to the heat shield, this is something. Look at that heat shield, which is right behind you.
I can't wait. Inspections once we get hard down in the well deck later this afternoon, and we'll get a good look at how we did.
Do you have any?
Looking at the capsule as it floats in the water through our binocular. Yeah, so this is the largest ablative heat shield and we modified the way that it's applied. Yeah, and then there are seams between those blocks, which is the red element. What we'll do is when we get the spacecraft back in, we'll go and look at how to wait for that flight test to get the final seam. Yeah, so far it's actually looking like
Action System Manager for the Orion program, and I know you're. Jeremy.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll send it back to you, Rob.
Today, everything went perfectly during Orion's high-speed entry back into the Earth's. We'll be continuing our coverage until in the middle of your screen, to his left, Flight Director Portland, where, again, my colleague Daryl Nail is.
Having a spacecraft splash down.
Absolutely, and it's really incredible. You were explaining to me, how you calculate these footprints, and Orion comes down and separates out the forward bit.
These would be, on top and bottom of a parachute. We were able to, really hammer down what the
And as I understand it, there are 26 pieces
at drogue off a couple sabots, and so we say, the lids and sabots
to tell where that parachute's going to float, because a parachute to you, that right there is impressive. The rest of it came down?
So right now, something that's still in the works, so we'll see.
All right.
2-hour mark since European service module and the attached would spend one orbit in low The vehicle conducted, provided the time, that would precede placing a crew on board, and the fact that we were pressing away from our set by the Apollo 13 vehicle. You can see the effect of that engine firing on the solar arrays on Orion's service module. That, in effect, was what amounted to a deorbit burn of sorts that placed Orion on a trajectory to return to Earth, which it did today with a splashdown 1 hour and 58 minutes ago. As we circled back around the moon for the return powered flyby, we saw a dramatic close-up of the moon and the crescent of the Earth in the distance, using the moon's gravitational field as a slingshot effect to set our sights on the Earth and the trajectory required to splash down in the Pacific, which we did, as Orion gently waits for the arrival of the recovery team that will begin the process of hauling the spacecraft into the well deck of the USS Portland. And this was the view from the cabin camera looking upward out of the forward bay, basically the top of Orion, as the first chutes were deployed. These were the forward bay covered parachutes that in turn pulled out drogue chutes and then the 3 main parachutes to dramatically slow down Orion's descent back to Earth. And as you see here, under 3 fully reefed chutes, Orion finally splashed down at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, to wrap up its mission of one. This is Mission Control Houston. Flight controllers here reporting back to Flight Director Judd Freeling that they have begun the power down of Orion's systems, with everything looking good and data having been acquired. So the post-splashdown test objectives are nearing an end. The vehicle is being powered down, and we should be a short time away from the point at which Flight Director Judd Freeling hands over the vehicle to the Exploration Ground Systems folks out in the Pacific. We'll be heading back shortly to the USS Portland, but as you can see, the first contingent of the Navy boats are approaching the Orion spacecraft, which is in great shape following its high-speed entry and splashdown that occurred just over 2 hours ago. We're just minutes away from handing over the vehicle to the Exploration Ground Systems folks. This is Mission Control Houston. Entry Flight Director Judd Freeling, who also was the Ascent Flight Director for Orion's launch aboard the Space Launch System 25.5 days ago, is addressing his team of flight controllers here in Mission Control. With that, Judd Freeling has handed over the Orion vehicle to a round of applause. The vehicle has now been handed over to the Exploration Ground Systems folks out in the Pacific, where my colleague Daryl Nail is standing by with members of the Navy helicopter team that saw Orion up close and personal about 2 hours ago. Daryl?
That's right, Robin. They were the first to see it. They picked up the heat signature as it came above the horizon, and they were the first to have a close-up look of the Orion crew module as it was in the water. I have with me, as you mentioned, 3 Navy pilots with the HSC-23 squadron in the Navy. They were flying the MH-60s, the Nighthawk helicopters. I've got Jacob Naylor, Jackson, for being here, and it's great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, tell me, first of all, this operation, for those who were watching earlier on, we saw your helicopters going around the area almost immediately after splashdown. Tell me about how you're able to do that, and then what unfolded for your mission.
Mounted on the front of the helicopter, and about 7 NASA personnel in the back. So while they're riding in the back, they're giving us azimuth and elevation angles to take a look at, and basically right away, even earlier than we expected, we picked up the capsule coming in. And so us 3 were they have basically a FLIR that uses infrared, so it's seeing that how hot that capsule is coming down. They caught it a whole way down, which was exactly what we needed for that engineering data.
Easy to lock in on, right? At 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the bottom of the heat shield, that FLIR was just almost instantaneous as soon as that thing came above the horizon. Then you began capturing imagery, and we watched as the helicopters circled, and sometimes they were doing some pretty nice banks around the Orion crew module. What was that about, Jackson? Why did they take that path around Orion?
Yeah, so the second part of the mission was to get a hazard analysis of the capsule, and then just engineering level fidelity data, like imagery from some of the photographers on board. And then we had another helicopter up that was testing out the new Angel beacon that the crews are going to wear eventually when the capsule does come down. So that all deals with our primary mission set of search and rescue, which is what we're hoping to do in Artemis II, is to actually pull the astronauts from the capsule via the hoist.
Right. And so you guys were also using data from the Sasquatch team. We just interviewed them and heard about the great work that they did in predicting where that debris field would be coming down, 26 different pieces as the crew module was getting its parachutes out and everything. Using that data, how accurate was it for you, and how did it help you fly around the area?
So there was actually one of the NASA personnel in the back had a tablet which had the debris field on top of it, and as time goes on, that debris field would get a little smaller and smaller, and so they helped give us headings and guidances on where to turn and where to get the aircraft to avoid any of that debris field coming down and hitting us in the head on the helicopter. So
yeah, right. And successful. You guys were looked great out there at sea, surrounding the capsule, flying, in fact, at sometimes very closely. We saw you hover. I don't know what the feet was, but it looked pretty close to the ocean surface.
Probably about 50 feet above, just so that the photographers could get good data. And then we were kept safe by Emily and her team. The whole Sasquatch team helped us with the footprints so that we knew where we could fly, so that we'd be safe.
Where does this rank for you guys in terms of your mission? I mean, you're young fellas, so you don't have your call signs yet, which eventually you'll get that. But being a part of this mission, it's very different, right? The civilian nature, where most DoD missions are not of that nature. So where does it rank in terms of you? What kind of what was it like for you?
It's absolutely amazing, and certainly a career highlight for us up until this point. Yeah, we were still just in the backup aircraft, but just being able to just support these awesome pilots that were out there with us. We had Therapist and Ripper and Stapler and James. All of them did such a great job. So we're just really excited that this is both exciting for us and kind of plants that seed to be exciting for everyone else watching, and excited for the next mission with astronauts in it. So.
And that'll be the next great part, right? So as Navy pilots, you'll be able to hover over top of the next capsule that comes down, and it's going to have astronauts in it. Briefly describe what you imagine that would be like.
That's got to be an unreal experience. I hope I'm still around to be able to be a part of that, because that's got to be one of the greatest feelings ever. Pulling someone out of a capsule that's just been to the moon and back. Unimaginable feeling, I got to say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all. We appreciate you. Jacob Naylor, Jackson Cotney. Being here.
Thanks for having us.
So much.
Appreciate you.
All right, and here on the USS Portland, the mission continues. The operation to recover the Orion command module, which you see is still out there in the Pacific. We're awaiting the Navy boats to get to connect up to that capsule and tow it back inside the USS Portland, our Navy ship on scene here. That's going to do it for us, for the Exploration Ground Systems, the Department of Defense, and NASA. We want to send it back to you, Rob, in Houston, Texas.
Daryl, and magnificent job out there on the USS Portland, and the work is just beginning out there, as you heard. Here in Mission Control, the work is over for the entry team of flight controllers who have handed the vehicle over to the Exploration Ground Systems and they will be making their way out of Mission Control with Orion's handover now complete. Splashdown occurring at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time. The team is posing for a team picture before they are released for the day. Upcoming, you can follow, if you wish, all of the remaining recovery work, including the Orion being brought into the well deck of the USS Portland on the YouTube channel that you see there, www.youtube.com/KSC Newsroom. The Kennedy Space Center Exploration Ground Systems folks now in charge of the operations to bring Orion back into the well deck, to get it back on shore, and then transport it back to the Kennedy Space Center for post-flight analysis. That'll wrap up our coverage of Orion's return to Earth, and let's point you to our post-splashdown news and take a look back at the 25-and-a-half-day mission of Orion, its first flight, next stop, a crew on board 2 years from now. With that, we wish you a great Sunday. This is Mission Control Houston.